Well, a long-awaited change on the left side of the infield is here. The Brewers recalling Cooper Pratt for his big league debut this week. Jacob Misiorowski delivered one of the best pitching performances probably in regular season history. That feels like hyperbole to say that, but it's really not, and we'll get to more of the details when we get to that portion of the show, when we recap that historic evening for the Miz. Quinn Priester, expected outcome has arrived here on his injury situation, his recovery. Brandon Woodruff may be making his way back. A lot of updates to go through here in the next hour or two on the Brewer Fanatic podcast. Spencer, I don't really want to beat around the bush here because we do have a lot to get to. But before we do that, I should ask how you're doing. I don't see you as much anymore because we're not in college season. So this is like my only face-to-face interaction with you, and it's through a screen. It's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. We'll probably see each other somewhat soon. We'll have some in-person coaches meetings and all that stuff coming up soon, I'm sure. But yeah, we got used to each other a lot over the last couple of months, and it is a little different. Otherwise,
it was rough. We saw a lot of each other for a while. We're kind of on an end of two extremes. I'd like to find something that sits in the middle a little bit more.
Yes, finding a happy medium would be wonderful. But yeah, no, I mean, I had a nice, relaxing weekend. Went up to Door County, just kind of got to hang out, not have to do anything. It was great. I needed a weekend like that for sure. Stopped up in Appleton on the way there for the doubleheader for the T-Rats on Friday, so it was good to see Andrew Fisher and Josh Adamszewski before they got promoted to Double-A over the weekend. And then I also ended up, we'll get to the Miz start, but I was watching that from my seat in Appleton because I watched the first inning between the doubleheaders, the two games of the doubleheader. And after that first inning, I was like, well, I'm not going to stop watching this. This looks insane. So I watched the full 9 innings while also, up and down watching basically 2 games at once. It was great. But yeah, it was, it's been a good week. A lot of fun Brewers baseball stuff. And that didn't even mention Cooper Pratt getting called up.
I just have to say that's quite possibly the most on-brand Spencer thing that I've ever heard. Has to watch the former top prospect having his best big league outing ever on his phone because he's already too busy watching the current prospects instead in person. So,
yep.
But yes,
exactly.
Good stuff from Misiorowski in that start. We'll get there. Glad you enjoyed your time in Door County. My getaway weekend is going to be this weekend. So maybe we're kind of staggering a little bit. So I'm leaving tomorrow, be up north for the weekend. And then it's a quick turnaround because I'm traveling to Cincinnati. I'm working that series. So going to be an early departure on Monday morning. We'll see how that goes. But before we get there, we do have to recap the week that was. And we'll just start with the biggest pieces of news. Obviously, Cooper Pratt is the big one. He was the story of the week, which kind of insane to me. I didn't even realize until I went back through this that the Miz thing and the Pratt thing are within the same week. It felt like there was way more time between those two than there really was. But we'll start with Cooper Pratt because that is the more recent one that's probably in more of the headlines right now. The Brewers making the move midway through the homestand ahead of their series with the Cleveland Guardians. Cooper Pratt's here. He's going to play shortstop. Luis Rengifo is not here. I think that was a pretty predictable way for it to go. We had talked a lot over the last few months about the different permutations that we might see. Maybe it could have been Joey Ortiz getting the call if they decided to make this move a few weeks ago. More than anything, this is going to be dictated by when they felt Cooper Pratt was ready and when having Cooper Pratt here was going to elevate the floor of their infield compared to what they had at that time. And obviously they think the time is now. And at the current point in time with how everything was looking, Luis Rengifo was unquestionably the worst player out of the 3 guys that they had getting most of the playing time on the left side. So him, Joey Ortiz, David Hamilton. Rengifo's out. Cooper Pratt, he's going to play shortstop just about every day. When he's in the lineup, he's going to be at shortstop. So before we talk about Pratt more specifically, just looking at what this means for the rest of the infield, Pat Murphy said right off the bat, Joey Ortiz is going to mostly shift to third base here. He also talked about how having Pratt means that you can get more days off for Bryce Terang. So we could see maybe Joey Ortiz plays a little bit of second base against some tough lefties. And then Hamilton obviously is still going to be in the mix at both of those positions as well. Murphy also mentioned that if Pratt does need a day between Ortiz and Hamilton, they have plenty of guys who they trust to play that position. But for the most part, it's going to be Cooper Pratt there just about every day. Joey Ortiz, David Hamilton kind of sliding into more of that utility role, mostly third base, just with how things work out now. You're probably looking at a platoon there. So we saw in that Guardians series, Hamilton got the starts at third against right-handed pitching. Joey Ortiz got one against the lefty in the series finale. But more than anything, we're talking about this infield picture. I think this just raises the floor, like I said, of this left side in a couple of different ways. Number one, Cooper Pratt doesn't need to do a whole lot to be better than Luis Rengifo. Number two, I think this is just good for the defense to be able to slide both Ortiz and Hamilton over to third base. Hamilton is very dynamic. We've talked about this a lot. He has the ability to be an elite defensive shortstop. It had gotten better than it was early in the year, but still was not to that point. I mean, we even saw a couple plays on his homestand where he still had that same issue of he gets to the ball and then he just gets stuck on his heels and he's taken like 4 pump fakes in his glove before he's finally rifling a ball over the top, and he's just giving a very tough one hopper to the first baseman. Jake Bauers made a very, very nice pick on one of those during the homestand, but Hamilton, I think he's a lot better when he's at third, where he just needs to be quicker. He's going to have more of those plays where he needs to charge the ball and just barehand it and spit it out right away. Joey Ortiz, a lot of what Joey Ortiz does really well plays up at third base, even though he's a very, very good shortstop. The quick hands, the fact that he's just very sure-handed over there at a position where you don't have a whole lot of time all the time. We saw him do very, very well at third base a couple of years ago in his rookie season. No question that he's going to be able to handle that position well. He made a nice barehanded play already in his first start back over there on Thursday. So not only are you kind of raising the offensive floor a little bit, but by moving Ortiz and Hamilton over to third, they're both going to be better defensive third basemen than Luis Rengifo was. And, we talked about Rengifo's defensive potential as well. I wrote the whole story on it in spring training where Matt Erickson said, hey, like this guy can actually move pretty explosively. And I think we did see shades of that. He would have little spurts where he was making a ton of really, really impressive highlight reel plays. And then he would kind of have another stretch where he's just botching routine plays. So clearly it wasn't coming together consistently there either, even though you could see the flashes. So kind of repeating myself, but the biggest deal here is you're raising the floor on that left side, both I think offensively and defensively.
Yeah, the combined production offensively from just shortstops, the guys who had been at shortstop at the time when they're hitting, was a 59 WRC plus prior to Pratt getting called up. So that's the floor on the offensive side of things right now. That Pratt, if he's outplaying that, like you've upgraded at shortstop offensively. I don't expect it to be great offensively, but I think he is going to perform better than that. I think somewhere in that 75, 80 WRC plus range, I think he can very well end up there. The defense is going to be really solid. I agree that 100% that it raises that floor. And then, moving to third base, what's the one knock on Joey Ortiz is the range. It's not awful, but it's not incredible at shortstop either. I would imagine it's pretty good for third base, and it also isn't as needed at third base. So he's going to get all of the positives that he brings, which is really solid glove, makes the easy plays, the good throws. When he can get to the ball, it's pretty much always going to be made. He did have a couple kind of routine plays that he had botched at short, but that's abnormal for him. It's not something I'd expect to continue. I think Hamilton at third base are probably going to give you more than Rengifo gave you offensively. And then they're also going to give you better defense. And then Pratt gives you better at short. So it's not some huge jump. I don't think you're going to see Cooper Pratt come in and completely reignite the left side of the infield. And all of a sudden it's this extremely big part of the lineup, or it's changing the entirety of the offense, but it raises the floor. It gets you a young player who now gets an opportunity to take an everyday role and kind of run with it, see what he can do, get comfortable at the level. And then maybe in a couple years, he can follow at least somewhat of the Bryce Terang path, and you do end up getting more offense. But for now, you take the young Bryce Terang, maybe a little bit better than what you got offensively from that Terang, and then the good defense at short instead of second, and you feel really good about that if that is what you end up getting.
So I do think it is important that we just emphasize that kind of stuff. What impact exactly is Cooper Pratt going to make right now, and what's the reasonable expectation? I think a lot of people, especially if you're not following prospects closely, which a lot of people don't, Spencer, you're kind of the weirdo here, and not just you, but just kind of making the larger point of kind of how these things go and what people are looking at. I think a lot of people hear, oh, number 4 prospect, he's up here. I think you might just automatically assume this is going to be a game-changing player. This is going to be a guy who really transforms the outlook at whatever position that he's coming up to play. That's not going to happen here. I would be very, very surprised if it happened here. And it's not just me saying that. It's not just Spencer saying that. Pat Murphy basically said as much when Pratt came up here. My story that went up on Thursday morning kind of talked about that a little bit and had some of those quotes talking about what player is he going to be right now. So Cooper Pratt, scouts have dreamed on the upside. They've seen him as someone who can potentially be about as complete of a player as you can be between his size. You know, he's 6'4", has the potential to fill out a little bit as he gets a little stronger, plays good defense. He's not crazy fast, but he's a very smart base runner. He actually had a pretty solid base running moment right away after he got on base for the first time. And we'll talk about that when we get there as well. But he's just got a high baseball IQ, good bat to ball. Like I said, scouts have thought that he can kind of grow into a little bit of raw power. That's all stuff that's going to have to come down the line, though. Right now, Cooper Pratt in AAA was making a lot of contact, getting on base at a decent clip, still chasing a little bit too much, and generally not hitting the ball very hard. That doesn't mean that he can't be a productive player right now, but what that means is you can't expect him to come up here and just have this fully developed end of the development process kind of approach where he's just going to be punishing baseballs and he knows which balls he can catch out in front and knows which balls he can do this with. He's not there yet. Development needs to finish at the big league level. And this is very much a case where he's just not, he's big league ready, but he's not remotely close to a finished product right now. And I think to some extent, this is something that I think both of us kind of overlooked with Bryce Terang a little bit when he struggled early. Now, granted, if you took one look at Bryce Terang physically at that point in his career, I don't think you could really guess that he was going to grow into the power that he has now. I think if you just look at Pratt's build right now compared to Terang's build, I mean, Pratt's over 200 pounds. He's 6'4", 210. Bryce was maybe 170 pounds soaking wet when he was in the big leagues, and he was under 6 feet tall or right at 6 feet tall. So definitely different builds, but Pat Murphy kind of talked about how it might look a little bit similar offensively. It won't be, exact because they are, again, different builds and different players in some ways. But he said, I want Cooper up here right now, just focused on getting on base. Play that kind of game. Let the baseball get deep so you can recognize pitches longer and you can make better swing decisions. Focus on using the opposite field. Just simplify the game a little bit. Maybe forego some opportunities to maybe drive a few more baseballs, knowing that this is just going to be kind of what gets you to a baseline level of production, which is what we saw Bryce Terang do. He big time shortened up his swing, simplified things a ton. That made him not a good hitter. He was still a below average hitter in his second season, mainly because he didn't hit for much power at all. But he got on base at a decent clip. He could use the speed and the base running ability to steal bases. He played great defense. That's kind of what Pat Murphy wants Cooper Pratt to do right now. So to your point, Spencer, if he's in more of that 75 to 80 WRC plus and it's a decent on base because the average is okay and he's playing good defense at shortstop and he's stealing a couple bags for you or even just giving you like a lot of first to thirds if he's hitting near the bottom of the lineup and he's able to just advance on a single by the top of the order. Those are the kind of things they want him to do right now. Then as he gets a little older, he's only 21 years old. As he gets older, as the big league team helps him put on more strength, and not to get on a tangent here, but that's quietly becoming something that the Brewers are getting really, really good at is like you're seeing it with, I know like Bryce did some outside work to get stronger, but what they did with Miz and him physically and the transformation he's had, they're pretty good at the strength and conditioning side of this stuff with development. So I'm sure Pratt's going to experience that now. But as that happens, he's going to kind of need to take the Terang path of, okay, now I'm getting bigger, now I'm getting stronger. I need to feel through what's my body capable of now, get calibrated with some things, and over time kind of figure out, okay, maybe I can build a little more bat speed, maybe I can get the bat head out in front a little more naturally, get a better understanding of which pitches that I can take this kind of swing on, which pitches where I need to have this kind of approach. And maybe it does then develop into more of that complete profile. But again, I think people just need to realize right now, like he is almost certainly going to be a well below average hitter as a rookie and maybe next year too. But that's just kind of how the development process works. And again, if he's able to do these other things and let some of these other tools, which are big league ready, play, he's not going to be a superstar right out of the gates. I think he's going to be a very solid complementary player who, again, like we talked about, is going to raise the floor of this team. But I just want to caution people who are maybe expecting that, oh, it's going to be this explosive player right away. Very unlikely, I think, that we see that. And again, like Pat Murphy and the Brewers are pretty openly acknowledging that too. Like, let's just get our ducks in a row here and understand how the development process plays out, especially for a kid like this.
Yeah, patience is going to be extremely important for everyone involved. It's going to be important for Cooper Pratt to understand that there's a process to all of this. There's going to be patience from the Brewers side and in letting it play out and in letting him work through this stuff. And then as fans, we're just going to have to understand that this is part of it. And I do think people are going to appreciate a lot of what he brings, which, to be fair, a lot of people did with Bryce Terang as well. Like there was a big contingent of Brewers fans who were big Bryce Terang fans even before the bat really came around. So I think people are going to be aware of it, but it is a very good reminder to just make sure people understand that if he does come up, or if he continues to stay up and all of a sudden you're seeing pretty mediocre numbers, you're not seeing many extra base hits, you're not seeing a lot of this stuff, and you're just kind of wondering what's going on, that's kind of not by design, but it's very much understood that that's probably going to be the case from the Brewers' point of view. So exercising patience, it'll go a long way. Everything you talked about with kind of what Murph is looking for from him, he showed pretty early. He's certainly letting the ball travel and trying to go the opposite way. Pretty much every swing he's had, other than a sac fly in the third game, has been to the opposite field. Even inside outing a couple, like, as you mentioned, as time goes on, he'll learn when he can kind of sell out, go after an inside pitch and get the bat head out and maybe drive one, especially as he adds strength. But for now, just keeping a good, clean approach, trying to hit line drives up the middle the other way. He's going to be capable of that. He's going to do good things when he's on the bases. The only thing you didn't mention, and it's not super important in terms of the baseball, but I'm sure the media is going to enjoy Cooper Pratt as an interview. He's a fun interview. He's well spoken. He's a 21-year-old. Like he's well spoken. He does a good job kind of handling all the attention, but he just looks very relaxed. Like a lot of these guys come up and they're doing that, the media stuff, and it just doesn't look like they're comfortable. They don't really know how to react to it. He looks very comfortable. He's like cracking jokes the first couple days he's up. It's cool to see. You can tell he just has you can tell just from those interviews why the Brewers believe so much in like the personality and the type of person that they think they have here, just because of the way he carries himself. So that's another part of the equation with the Brewers and Cooper Pratt and why they gave him that extension. They believe in him as a person and a human being, and as somebody that is, in their mind, what I've always heard is they viewed him as a future leader for the team. Even when he was back in like low A, that was something they saw in him, that he kind of had that to him. He was learning Spanish this spring to try and be able to communicate better with some of his Spanish speaking teammates, like that type of stuff too. So there's a ton to like about Cooper Pratt. There's one thing that's probably going to lag behind, and it's going to be the bat early on. but they have a plan in place. They have a blueprint in Bryce Terang that they can at least try to follow somewhat. And we saw what happened when patience was able to be exercised with Bryce Terang. And again, neither of us are saying that they're going to get that exact same outcome, because let's be real, that was like a 99th percentile outcome for Bryce Terang's bat and his progression. Like, it went about as well as you could possibly hope. But even if it's an 80th percentile version of that or close to that, they're going to feel really good about Cooper Pratt. And at that point, he's going to be an extremely valuable player, because the defense, the base running, all of that other stuff is always going to be there. If the bat comes around, they're going to love the deal. They're going to love him at short, and it's going to be hard for anybody to overtake him at that spot for a long time.
We'll break down Pratt's debut when we get there during the weekend review. The other piece of news coming out of the Brewers clubhouse on Thursday morning, Quinn Priester is indeed going to undergo surgery for thoracic outlet syndrome. He's going to have a rib removed. Priester said the expected timeline is about 8 to 10 months, but he's thinking that he can get out on the early end of that, basically hoping that he can be throwing in spring training. But that timeline would otherwise kind of put him on pace for maybe like a May or June return next year, in terms of like when he's actually done with a rehab assignment and fully built up. But Pat Murphy kind of characterized this post game as, like we had talked about, basically they arrived at about as far back as they could push this before the surgery would start to bleed too much into next year. And based on this reported timeline, like, it already does look like it's going to bleed a little bit into his availability for next year. So you can maybe make the argument that they waited just a little too long. But Murphy basically said this is kind of the date that they had circled. Priester said part of the reason that they waited this long is they just really wanted to avoid this if at all possible. So he said part of the reason that it took so long is they basically tried every single possible treatment under the sun for this deal. Nothing was really working well enough. He did say this morning that they were able to get rid of the pain and the discomfort, but still didn't have that full feeling as he was kind of coming up over his head with his arm and extending. And you could see that showing up in the lack of command, obviously. So this felt pretty inevitable, basically right from the start. So here we are. This is kind of where it's at right now, but that's the fuller explanation of why it took until now and kind of the stops that they pulled out along the way for Quinn Priester.
Yeah, it'll be unfortunate if it does cost them a little bit of the season, but I think you can follow the logic and you can follow the timeline, and it's understandable how it got to this point. So it mostly, it just sucks for Quinn Priester. I mean, to have such a great season after the trade and to come into this year and you're kind of thinking he's probably your number 3, if not a little bit higher, depending on how Woodruff goes. And you really don't know what you're going to get out of Miz and some of these other guys in their first full seasons, especially with the Brewers. And you don't get that. And for him, that's more than anything, that's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure he was looking to really build off of his first truly good professional season at the big league level. And now he just kind of has the setback. And you could hear, speaking of well-spoken, I talked about this from the time they got him, but he is really good in that setting. Like I actually saw a reply from some like random fan who was like, is he the one performing the surgery? Like, this dude's speaking about it like as well as anyone possibly could. But yeah, he's a guy I want to root for, and I will be rooting for, and I hope everything just kind of comes out on the other side in a good place. These surgeries have been more successful lately. I think they've been a lot more successful lately, but there are still concerns anytime you have thoracic outlet syndrome stuff. So hopefully this goes well. Hopefully all is good when he comes back early next season, and we see a version of Quinn Priester that we saw in 2025, because he would certainly help the 2027 rotation if it is.
Some further injury updates here as we look ahead to how things are looking on the Brewers roster. Another injured pitcher, Coleman Crow. He was recently placed on the injured list with a right forearm flexor strain. That sounds ominous, but he did say pretty much right off the bat that they got imaging on it and there was really nothing structurally wrong, just a little bit of inflammation, basically, is how they characterized it. And they said he was only going to be down from throwing for a couple of days. And I can confirm that he was indeed only down from throwing for a couple days. Wasn't really a Logan Henderson situation where they said he would be down for a couple days, and to my knowledge, he's still down and he needed an injection. But Crow was throwing a flat ground on Thursday morning, so he is back on the field and he's playing catch and he's progressing. So it sounds like it's going to be a pretty brief stint for him. He did say that this kind of dated back to something that he was feeling since spring training. The only difference was in his last two outings, that was the first time that he really started feeling something while he was throwing. That's kind of when they decided to back off and shut it down for a little bit. But seems so far like we do actually have a Brewers injury that they said was on the mild side and is actually progressing like it was on the mild side.
Yeah, knock on wood. I think we got to hope that it all keeps going well, but it does seem like it was a legitimately minor thing. Like you said, he was only feeling it when he was recovering before. It was kind of in those days off between starts that he was feeling a little something, and this time feeling it while he was throwing. Probably a good call to kind of nip that in the bud as quick as possible and call it out when you are feeling it mid-inning, mid-game, mid-outing, rather than kind of pushing through it, especially at this point in the season. And that's hard for a young pitcher. Like a guy who's getting his first chance in the big leagues, who's getting the opportunity to make starts, and he knows that he's been able to deal with it. That's not easy. So I give him a ton of credit for actually being willing to bring it up and say, hey, this is kind of, I'm feeling it a little bit more. Let's try and cut this off right here. And it seems like it's going to kind of play out exactly like you would hope. So good for him. Good news for him. Good news for the Brewers as another starter option, because there have been so many injuries on the pitching side, which, I mean, we're going to keep going through them here, but it has been insane how many guys have been hurt. And that trickles down to Nashville too. I mean, they've got a ton of pitcher injuries going on down there too.
Someone who might be working his way back in the near future here, Brandon Woodruff, he made another rehab start. This time he pitched for the Timber Rattlers. He threw 80 pitches with them on Tuesday night, and sounds like his next start is going to be with the Brewers, likely sometime next week when they're in Cincinnati. Pat Murphy said that during that rehab outing, he was sitting about 90 to 92 with the fastballs, which is fine. Probably still a tick below where he was before, but again, we'll see how it looks when he gets back into big league games. More than anything, I'm just still curious to watch how he's actually sequencing guys, because no pitch tracking data from this one. Spencer, I don't know if you watched it a little more closely, but we know in the ACL start, a lot more cutters, a lot more changeups. He's experimenting with the lower slot. Like, clearly he's doing things differently than he has ever done them before for a reason. So it's going to be curious to see how much of that continues when he gets back up here, how much of that he's going to need to do when he gets back up here. But like we've talked about it has looked like throughout this process, he is at least preparing himself to be different or have different ways of doing things, even than what he was able to do last year coming off the surgery.
Yeah, I didn't have the chance to watch this when I was at the Brewer game when he was pitching, but from the people who were there, because there are some Brewer fans there out in Cedar Rapids or Quad Cities, whichever one he was pitching in this time, who were at the game, and they did say a lot of cutter usage. I don't think they were mentioning too many changeups, so it might have been just a lot of fastballs. But yeah, we've talked about it already a couple times, but it's probably going to look different, even if the Brewers are kind of being hush-hush about it. I have a feeling, and you've talked about it, it's going to look different. And that doesn't mean it won't work or that it won't be effective, but it probably will be a different looking Brandon Woodruff than what we saw even last year when we already thought he might need to change.
DL Hall, he received an anti-inflammatory injection a couple days ago in that pec that he's been dealing with. He's expecting to resume playing catch in a few days here, the week of June 22nd, so next week. His hope is to be ready for a rehab assignment soon after the All-Star break. As a reminder, they kind of said about that 4 to 6 week return timeline on him, so it sounds like he's roughly on pace for that. Logan Henderson, who we mentioned briefly before, he's continued to be down because he did end up needing an injection in his back for that inflammation. However, he has started throwing bullpens as of a couple days ago. So I may have misspoke earlier and said that he still wasn't throwing. He is throwing bullpens now. So starting to get back on the mound and move around a little bit. I would imagine there's probably going to be a pretty cautious timeline there, knowing how
Yeah.
tricky back injuries can be and knowing that Logan Henderson has already, unfortunately, racked up quite a few injuries during his brief stints in the big leagues. Rob Zastryzny, he's aiming to throw a bullpen session next week on June 21st. That's the latest update that we have on him. As a reminder, he's dealing with that trap issue that, again, still kind of traces back to that whole kind of shoulder back area that's been bothering him basically since the World Baseball Classic. Jared Koenig, he did get the win in his latest rehab start, but we don't care about wins on this show because that's not a very useful stat at all. Looking more at the velo and the command, it's just been sporadic is probably the best way to describe both of those. Would I be accurate in saying that?
Very much so. Yeah. A few outings ago, he was averaging about 90 on the sinker. It was up a little bit in this last time out. He was touching 95 a couple times, but he was kind of sprayed all over the place. It hasn't been super encouraging to watch him in AAA, and the stuff kind of backs it up. It just isn't quite popping like it did the first couple of years he was with the Brewers. I'm guessing he's going to get an opportunity to come back to the big leagues and see what he can do. But if I were to guess, and I hate to kind of project it this way, but I just don't think I would be a little surprised if by the trade deadline, Jared Koenig is part of the Brewers bullpen. I guess that's probably the timeline I would set it at. I just don't, at his age, with the injury, with it not bouncing back well, the rehab outing's not looking good. It was already kind of like you were kind of waiting for the year where it might not quite be there for Jared Koenig. I just don't know that he makes it. I don't think he makes it through the season as a Brewer, and it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Pat Murphy kind of hinted that they are not going to hesitate to stretch that rehab clock out if that's what it takes. He gets the full month down there. When someone asked him about him this week, Murph basically said he has to work his way back. Make of that what you will. So
Yep.
I think they're kind of on the same page here that it just hasn't been good enough or consistent enough yet. So he's going to keep throwing down there, and we'll just kind of have to see what happens with him. Brandon Lockridge, he was initially getting close to a rehab assignment. We had talked about that on the last show. That has not happened yet because he was experiencing some flare-ups when he was accelerating and really getting into the higher intensity workouts. So he got a PRP injection in his knee earlier a few days ago, and they're just going to kind of wait and see here, see how it bounces back. And then if things are feeling a little better, then the hope is that he can get out on a rehab assignment shortly here. But another guy who kind of getting toward the longer end of that timeline of how much time he's going to miss here. But those are the big injury updates that we have for this week. Now we get to jump into more of the fun stuff. We're going to start, obviously, with Jacob Misiorowski in the first game of that Phillies series. We don't even really have any other notes here, and this was also one of the rare post games where every single post game question to Pat Murphy was about one topic, and rightfully so. So just to quickly rattle off some of the numbers here. It was a complete game shutout for Jacob Misiorowski. It was a Maddox, so a complete game shutout of under 100 pitches. He did it on 95. He struck out 15 guys while throwing 95 pitches. That is a new record for the most strikeouts in a Maddox since we started reliably tracking pitch counts. Tarek Skubal had the previous high with 13 Ks, so Miz beat it by 2. The only hit that he gave up was to Kyle Schwarber in the 4th inning. He faced the minimum, though, because he quickly got a double play ball after that. He had 23 fastball whiffs. He set the new record for a starter for fastball velo multiple times in one at-bat to Kyle Schwarber. He hit 104.5 to Schwarber to lead off the game, and that's the pitch that he struck him out with on a foul tip. The other funny part about this is if you look at his velocity by inning, the breakdown is his hardest inning in terms of velocity was the first inning. His second hardest inning was the 9th inning in terms of velocity. So he felt the adrenaline going back out for the 9th, was able to ratchet it up to 103 multiple times to close it out. I did kind of wonder after that 8th inning, I was like, how's it going to look when he comes back out for the 9th? Because I figured he was coming back out just because of what he was doing and they had to give him that opportunity. But kind of see the velo was starting to trend down a little bit in that 8th inning. And when I say trend down, I'm saying 98, which is, again, insane to be talking about. Like, oh, it's trending down at 98. Like, it still works at 98, but kind of pointing to, okay, maybe he's starting to just wear down a little bit. We'll see how it looks in the 9th. That was not a problem. He locked it in and had probably his second best inning in terms of stuff of the evening. Everything about this was ridiculous, though. To throw a 15 strikeout Maddox on 95 pitches, to only give up one hit because you made what, I mean, it's easy to say bad pitch call now that he got the hit, but I think just process-wise, like, they were late on every single fastball, and
Yeah.
he explained it in postgame, like, well, we thought he'd be looking heaters, so we wanted to kind of just get that back door on him with the breaking ball. I understand that, but they're all looking heater. You're throwing it 75% of the time. They know it's coming, and they're still late on it. But they also had some sequences later in the game where they did mix in cutters and sliders, and it did work, and they did get the swings they were looking for. So, what are you going to talk about? But to me, this outing, I know it wasn't a no-hitter. I know it wasn't a perfect game. This was better pitching than you're going to see in a lot of no-hitters and a lot of perfect games.
Yes, this genuinely was one of the best pitched games in big league history. I was sitting there, like I said, watching it in the stands at the T-Rats game, and it was kind of funny because I was right on the aisle, so I had people walking past and noticing that I had the game up on my phone and asking about the score and like, oh, how's Miz doing? And I was just telling them like, he has 10 strikeouts through 4. Like it was just constantly telling him like, yeah, he's just dominating right now. And then I was with my brother and a couple of his friends, and I was just giving him updates every inning, and I'd be like, he's through 8 on 86 pitches with 14 strikeouts, and they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Like, it's hard to even fathom. And they weren't watching it. They were just hearing the numbers come through when I was telling them, and they were seriously like laughing and going like, that's insane. And just watching it, I mean, he could not have been pitching better. He was hitting spots. It doesn't even matter that much if you're hitting spots when you're throwing 101 to 104, but he is. And I feel like we've kind of tried to dance around like giving him too much praise and spending too much time on him in some of the most recent episodes, just because, yeah, he's been unbelievable and like we don't need to spend a ton of time on it. But this is just absurd what he's doing right now. Like, it's not human. He is having the best stretch anybody's ever had in this stretch of games that he's had here. Is it 8-9 starts now? 8 or 9, whatever it is, with a 0.17 ERA and striking out just absurd numbers of players. He's going deep into every single start. It's unbelievable how far he has come. I couldn't imagine it even I have in my notes from when he was a prospect, I have it written like could be the best pitcher in baseball, but the floor is way lower than that. Like there's that type of upside, but the floor is way like reliever. It was reliever. It's year 2, and he's the best pitcher in baseball. I don't think it's super debatable right now. Like, I really don't. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to continue and that he's going to have it for years and years and years like we've seen from people who dominate. But if you asked who I want of every pitcher in baseball to take the mound for my team right now, it is Jacob Misiorowski. And that is unbelievable for him to be at this point in his career where he made his debut a year ago to the day from this outing. And 1 year later, he is doing things that no one's ever seen, and he's doing it efficiently, and he's doing it in ways that just are so hard to wrap your head around after everything you had seen and what I had seen coming through the minors. Like, I don't think you can give him enough credit or the Brewers enough credit for how well this development has gone. It's truly insane. this was the best outing I've seen. Like I was very young for Ben Sheets' 18 strikeout game, but I was watching it live, and I have gone back and I watched the full game at one point during COVID because, you know, it was COVID. What else was I going to do? I watched the full game. Like, Ben Sheets was getting 23 inches of plate to work with that day. He had a ton of shadow help, and the Braves just couldn't see anything on the breaking ball. It was an incredible game. He was awesome. It's not taking anything away from him. This was by far the best start in Brewers history, and the Juan Nieves no-hitter, any of that. You know, honestly, the best case would probably be the Corbin Burns extra innings one that he carried the no-hitter into. That would honestly probably be the best case for me because he was shoving in that game, but this still tops that. It was unbelievable. I really, like, normally I don't have a loss for words when I'm talking about pitching, and I just can't even put it into words how good he was in this. Every single facet of the outing, it just couldn't have been much better. And like you said, he gives up his first hit, and he gets Bryce Harper to ground into a double play, and that's how he erases that one base runner. Like, he wasn't getting grounders hardly at all. That's not really the way he pitches. I mean, he got a few because everyone's going to be late on 103 and pounded into the ground, but like in that spot, it was almost like he's like, well, now I can erase the runner by just throwing a cutter at Harper and getting it on his hands and having him roll over to second, and then we'll keep the pitch count low and we'll keep moving. Like, he's operating on a different level than anyone in baseball, but especially from where I could have ever have envisioned him being at coming into this year. It's incredible. I don't think anything we say will actually be able to kind of put into words how ridiculous he is right now, because I don't think we've seen it, and I don't really know that we'll see it for a while. The only person I can see continuing to do it right now is Jacob Misiorowski, because I don't know, as long as he's staying healthy, I don't know what really stops him right now, because he's just operating on a different level.
It's the best start I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a whole lot to add to that I can put into words, like you said, and I don't think I need to add a whole lot to that. You know, it just kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah.
The Brewers did score 6 runs in this game, by the way. Jake Bauers hit a 3-run homer late to kind of extend that lead, but honestly, the early 2-0 lead was already enough in this one. So,
yep.
Moving on to the rest of the series, the Brewers would drop game 2, 9-8. Shane Drone got the ball in this one, and if you're looking at the line, 5 innings, 4 runs, 8 hits, a homer, just doesn't look great. But he threw the ball much better in this one than I think the line looks, and even than he gave himself credit for. He was rather critical of this start when we talked to him in post game, and I get it a little bit. He talked about just some of the 2-strike pitches that weren't good enough, and that was true. He did put himself into kind of a little bit of a disadvantage at times when he wasn't making good enough 2-strike pitches. But he talked about it like saying, oh, there were 2-strike pitches that I needed to get up more or down more because he was giving up 2-strike hits. But I think he was giving up the 2-strike hits because he was throwing non-competitive pitches on 0-2 and 1-2.
Yep.
And then you're letting the hitter back into the count. And then that's kind of how you get to the situation where now you are throwing a pitch that's a little more over the plate. The hitter's just more comfortable. It's going to be a little bit easier for them to kind of get to that, and they're just going to be in a better spot. But he had 7 strikeouts in this one. Like I said, I thought he pitched really, really well. I'm trying to find the actual numbers for it, but he had a lot of whiff in this one. He had a lot of weak contact. I thought he was good. He had 17 whiffs. I just found it. 17 whiffs out of 39 swings. 44%, 25% hard hit rate, 85.9 average exit velo. And again, the 2-strike pitches could have been better, but most of the time, if you are getting that much swing and miss and you're getting that much weak contact and you're throwing that many strikes, he didn't walk anybody in this game, like you're going to have very, very good results doing basically exactly what he did in this one more often than not. The one home run that he gave up too, it was an 0-2 pitch to Edmundo Sosa. It was a fastball that was above the zone and outside the zone. Like he said post game that he was trying to go up and away, but he thought he could get it more up and away. I don't even know if he could say that. Like that's he just kind of stuck the bat out there and was able to drive it to right. So, it was a good 2-strike pitch, I thought, on that one. He threw the ball really well, and I think he just deserves a little more credit for that than he's probably getting from a lot of people who are just looking at the results.
Yeah, if he went much further up and out, it would have been a pitch out to Sosa. Like I couldn't believe he hit that ball out when I was watching it. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think the bigger issue is that he was letting the back into counts rather than not putting them away immediately on pitches that they just really didn't have to think about. We talked about that a lot with like Freddie Peralta in the past, where you get to 0-2 and then it's not necessarily that you don't have the stuff to put them away. It's that you're throwing pitches that they don't even have to, for a second, consider swinging at. And he had a decent amount of those in this one. But process-wise, other than that, I mean, just about everything else was good in this one. He was getting a ton of swing and miss, soft contact. I mean, that's what you want from a pitcher. I appreciate that he holds himself to a high standard, and I think good big leaguers are always going to find things that they can kind of nitpick with a start. And it's even easier to nitpick it when the results do end up being 4 earned in 5 innings, but he pitched well in this one, and the line was not indicative of how well he was throwing the ball.
Chad Patrick did not pitch well for the second straight outing. He came out of the bullpen in relief of Shane Drowan. He did end up finishing in a full inning because he did settle down a little bit after the early damage, but 5 hits, 4 more runs against him. Just not great spraying the ball around for the first several hitters, and basically it was either nowhere close or right down the middle. So not a great line for him. He did bounce back in a big way later in the week, so we'll talk about that when we get there. Drew Rom, he also appeared out of the bullpen in this one. Couple of walks, gave up a run. It was interesting to see how much whiff he was getting on the four-seamer, though, because it's a high slot and it's not great vert, but guys just look absolutely flummoxed by it. And I'm not entirely sure why.
I got nothing, man. It is 92 to 94 tops.
It was lower than that in this game. It was like 90 to 92 in this one.
Right. Like we're talking a low 90s fastball with very mediocre characteristics from a high slot. Like I get that you can hide the ball well and that's going to play a role, but plenty of pitchers do that. And they still need to have more than just hiding the ball well to get these whiffs, but it's working so far. I don't fully understand it. It seems like at some point it's not going to work and then the ball might get hit pretty hard. But it's going to be really interesting to follow. I think that's the main thing. Like, is this something that's actually going to be sustainable and continue? Because if it is, then I think that would be a very interesting thing to discuss and try to figure out what exactly is causing it, because everything you look at in terms of the analytics and the data and everything else, just it's not a good pitch on its own. And I don't even think maybe it tunnels decently with the breaking ball. He doesn't use the splitter a ton since he's been up. Like it's not like
he was throwing like 80%
right. That's
for
the
most
thing.
Of the outing. He just kept coming at him with them. So
he's not tunneling it with anything right now. It's just going at him with the fastball. So I don't get it. I don't know how it's working. I hope it continues to, because they can certainly use all the healthy, decent arms they can get right now in the big leagues. But that is one of the more confusing. I just don't understand how it's happening. But like I said, hopefully it continues to.
Brewers did have plenty of offense in this one, especially courtesy of Jackson Chourio. Garrett Mitchell homered in this one. Chourio homered to tie it at 3 briefly before Drone gave up a little bit more as the game went along in the middle innings. And then really you could just see the way the Patrick outing kind of transformed the trajectory of this one, because the Brewers were down big after Patrick pitched. Chourio hit another homer to bring it to 8-5. Then he hit a 2-run single to make it 9-8. But at that point, you're down. That's why Rom is pitching now. It just kind of changes the whole trajectory of that game, and the Brewers came up just short in this one. They would bounce back in game 3 to win 4-0. Chourio picking up where he left off, hitting a leadoff homer off Christopher Sanchez. And then Blake Perkins continued to improbably have great numbers against Christopher Sanchez. He had a 3-run homer and a double off of him in this game. For his career, he is now 6 for 7 against him with 3 doubles and a homer. I do think this is where having the ability to have big swings can show up for a team. Not necessarily that the Brewers always need it as much as other teams because they do so many other things well, but I asked Pat Murphy about this specifically, and he said as much. When you're facing a guy like Sanchez, you're just not going to get that many good pitches because his stuff isn't even like that amazing. It was I hadn't even really like looked into his arsenal because I saw the numbers and the success, but it wasn't until he came to Milwaukee here that I finally looked at, okay, what is he throwing? How does his stuff move? Like it's very basic. 3 pitches, sinker, changeup, not so good slider. Like shape wise, it because it plays so well off the sinker, it
Yeah.
gets really, really good results. But he's basically coming right at you. He's going to be on the corners. He's going to kind of go in, out, do some different things. That means you're not going to get a ton of hittable pitches though. So that was largely the case in this one. He was very good for most of this start, but when he does give you that pitch, you got to be able to do some damage with it because you're not going to get enough of them to kind of string things together. And that's basically what happened in this one. Churdio got one and he was able to take advantage. Perkins got a couple. He was able to take advantage. And 4-0. I mean, Sanchez still went decently deep into this game, but Murphy said like that was pretty much how we got to him. And we kind of got him off his game for a couple batters by just having 1 or 2 of those big swings. And it ended up being enough behind Kyle Harrison, who had kind of an interesting start. I don't think he was as dominant. Conversely, like the opposite of Drone, I don't think he was as good or as dominant as the line looks, where he went 6 shutout, only giving up 3 hits. He only had 3 Ks. Early in this game, he really was not sharp at all. The velo was down. The command was not great. He didn't have the slurve really to back up the fastball. The fastball was getting a couple of loud outs early on. Then he said that kind of midway through the game, Gary Sanchez told him, "Hey man, like mechanically you're moving too slow right now, and that's kind of causing you to lose that conviction and that life and that velo on your pitches." So after Gary Sanchez told him to speed up, 4th, 5th, 6th inning, that velo started to creep back up again. He went from getting basically no fastball whiffs in the first 3 innings to a ton of whiffs over the last 3 innings. So he was able to bounce back nicely in this one. Pat Murphy said that he agreed, thought that Harrison really looked the best toward the tail end of this one. We hear credit William a lot from Pat Murphy. Maybe got to credit Gary on this one.
Yeah. I mean, noticing that type of stuff is something that a catcher is going to have a really good eye on or a good view of from behind the plate. And it's something that's part of their job to kind of notice when something's a little bit off or something's a little bit different. And sometimes it's part of their job to tell a pitcher like who might be wondering like, why am I not throwing as hard? What's going on? Sometimes it's their job to BS them too and just tell them like, hey, you're just not moving as quick. Just get moving. Like you don't even know. Sometimes that's what you do. You just give them something like that and you're like, hey, just move quicker. We'll be good. And it just puts a little confidence in them like, oh, okay, that's all I got to do. Switch that up and we'll be fine. And it might not have been the real issue, but it kind of solves it just because it gets a pitcher out of his head. I don't know which one it was in this case, but either way, that's something that I think gets overlooked. And I think it's one of those things that William is quite good at. Like we talk about when he fires the ball back to the pitcher and when he gets him to calm down and all of that stuff. Like I'd imagine that's one of those things that he's usually pretty good at as well. So seeing Gary in this situation get some credit for it is cool. And part of it is too, like if that was legitimately the case, sometimes as a pitcher, it's a day game. It's a warmer day. You're just dragging a little bit and you don't notice it. You think you're giving everything you got. You think you're moving the same way, but you're just not quite there. And then it takes somebody going, hey, why aren't you moving as quick as usual? Or looks like you're not moving as quick right now. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I do have a little bit more that I can be giving. Like that type of stuff happens too. I've been there before. So it's an interesting thing, but he definitely got better as the outing went on. Like those first 3 innings, I know it was obviously scoreless, but the line drive double play to first base, that ball was smoked at Vaughn, and that got him out of a jam. But if that's 3 feet higher, it's a double down the line and a run. That type of stuff was kind of happening. And then after that, he settled in and looked a lot more like the guy we're used to seeing most of this season for sure.
Out of the bullpen, Abner Uribe, Aaron Ashby covering 3 innings, giving up just 1 hit the rest of the way to close this one down. Then we get to the Cleveland series, like we talked about. Cooper Pratt called up ahead of that one. Luis Rengifo DFA'd. Pratt was in the lineup for his big league debut in the opening game of the series. The Brewers winning that one by a final of 2-1. Robert Gasser getting the start in this one. I think we had talked about it after his Vegas start that he was better in that outing than it looked, and he was just pitching and again on the moon, and that's really
Yeah.
where you saw the home runs come from. And I think you saw it reflected in this start now, where I think he threw the ball rather similarly and had good results this time because he's pitching in a normal environment. Worked into the 6th inning in this one, only 2 hits allowed for him, struck out 5. He did have 2 walks. One of those walks, though, were like 3 of the balls in that walk were barely off the corner, and they were some really, really good takes. So I'm not really holding that one against him. Pat Murphy did say he still thinks the command has to get a little better than it has been. I don't think he's wrong on that one, but it has made, I think, some very major strides from where it was both last year and the first 2 outings that we saw from Gasser this year. Remember, it was like 2 weeks ago that we were saying, I'm not entirely sure what the role for him is right now because it just looks so bad and so non-competitive. It's taken a big step forward these last 3 outings now. Also like the way that he was sequencing his pitches. We saw a lot more of the high 4-seam in this one, which we've talked about plenty. I like that pitch. I think it's a good pitch. I think they should be utilizing that to make him a more balanced pitcher. And he did kind of touch on it in postgame when I asked about just the way he's using the fastballs. You said, yeah, like the approach right now is kind of early in counts. I'm going to go at you with the 2-seamer because I want to try to get the early swing, the early contact, the early out. But as soon as I'm in a put away count, I'm going to go to the 4-seamer because I do want to try to strike you out and I want to try to put you away that way. And you could kind of see it in the usage, like very high on the sinker early in counts. Once he got to 2 strikes, it was mostly the 4-seamer or the sweeper and putting him away that way. So I like that it seems they're finding more of that balance for how he should be using his stuff because like we were even talking about when he debuted 2 years ago, I think that's how it probably should have been from the start.
Yes, this is absolutely how it should have been, and I'm glad they found it now, and he seems to understand it and be comfortable with it because this is how he's going to be at his best. He needs to be able to put guys away when he gets into those good pitcher counts. It is great to get first, second pitch ground balls. Like, you want those anytime you get them. But you're also going to get first or second pitch takes. You might throw a sweeper in. All of a sudden, it's 0-2. We don't need to stick with the sinker then. And I'm glad that they've kind of figured that out. And now they can go to this good 4-seam. Like, this is a good pitch. This is a pitch that can get swing and miss, can generate strikeouts, whiffs, all of it, or just weak pop-ups. Like, it's just a good pitch. And finding that balance is really, really nice to see. And on top of what you already talked about with all the command improvements and everything else, like, he very quickly has kind of changed my tune on how he's looking because he changed how he was looking very quickly. Like, I can't believe it's the same guy. We saw those first couple starts, and it was hard because you never know when some of the surgery stuff starts to kind of finally be put in the rear view. But it had felt like he had enough time when he first came up this year to be like, okay, this isn't really something where you can say, well, he's still working his way back. Like, he had a lot of rehab time in Nashville last year. He made appearances in the big leagues. He pitched in the NLDS, and it just never had really looked right until all of a sudden, that was the Giants start, I believe, was the first one we started to kind of see it turn around like that outing. And since then, it's been very good. And I know you mentioned it, but like that A's game, he pitched much, much better than that line said. And it is kind of funny when we go back and forth with a lot of these because there's been a lot of cases recently where like Kyle Harrison did not pitch nearly as poorly as that Vegas line said he did, but he didn't pitch as well as the line said he did in that Philly start. It does normally even out over the course of a bigger sample, but this version of Gasser is somebody that I happily have at the back of my rotation and giving starts to because it'll play. It's going to give you 5+ innings most nights. with a decent amount of strikeout, a lot of ground balls. Those are really good qualities to have from a guy that, even with him looking good, you're probably not going to be relying on as an every time through the order starter the rest of the season once guys get healthy. But to have him in your back pocket is really nice.
Aaron Ashby with the ultimate vulture win in this one because he blew the lead by allowing the game-tying run after a walk and a few sequences of events to bring him around to score. But he ended up getting the win because the Brewers would take the lead on a Garrett Mitchell homer shortly thereafter. Both runs in this one coming on solo shots. Bryce Terang homered first. Garrett Mitchell, like I said, he got a hanging breaking ball. We know what Garrett Mitchell does when he gets the hanging breaking ball. He hit it 113 miles an hour, 440 feet. Jake McKibben wrote about this recently with Mitchell, just talking about how for a while there, he was kind of getting away from what he was good at. And we had talked about it too, making a little bit of progress against the high fastball, but not to the point where he was good against that either. And he was also going away from what he was good at. And I think you kind of saw that coincide with when he really struggled for about a month there. He's been red hot in June right now. And a lot of it does come back to he's back to punishing the pitches that we know he can punish. And also, like, I still don't see guys going after him as aggressively with the high fastballs I thought they would. I really thought that Pirates series was going to be teams were going to catch on, but I don't know, man. I'm still confused a little bit. Maybe it really is just playing out that there's just not that many teams who actually think that they can execute that pitch that consistently, and maybe he's just not going to see it that much. It's going to be interesting. I think we just at this point need to see how it looks by the end of the year because he just kind of keeps alternating back and forth between red hot and ice cold, and at both times it doesn't look fully sustainable. So I think we just need to keep waiting and kind of see what the full picture looks like, assuming he's able to stay healthy here.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably, and at this point, I think I just have to embrace the chaos with Garrett Mitchell and just say, I think it's just always going to be super up and down. And that's okay because, I mean, some of the highs are going to be unbelievable. Like, he is on a crazy hot streak right now. And the colds are going to be tough. They're going to be rough to watch, and it's not going to go well at all. But when you look at it and you kind of start to look into like potential playoff series, if you get Garrett Mitchell on a hot streak while you're going into the playoffs, that's a guy who can change series. Like, that's a guy who can really impact multiple games. He can completely flip series on their head because he can change a game every time he comes up to the plate. So if that's your 6th or 7th best hitter in a lineup, I think that's okay. I think you can have guys like that, and he can probably do okay. I don't think he's ever going to be I still don't really ever believe that he reaches anywhere close to what his true ceiling is, which is obviously something where he's doing what he's doing right now, but he's doing it pretty much all the time. But I think we're going to have some really high highs, and it's going to have the low lows, and it's going to be more extreme than most hitters because I don't know if we've ever really talked about this, but like every big league hitter is streaky to an extent. Like I feel like people don't fully grasp that over the course of a season. They just like to start calling people streaky. And I'm like, well, yeah, they're going to have 5-game stretches where they're not good. Like, that's just part of the season for everybody. That doesn't make them streaky. But a guy like Garrett Mitchell is streaky. Like, it's going to be 3 weeks of some of the best offensive production you'll see. And then it's probably going to be 3 weeks of, yeah, it's like a 500 OPS and he's striking out almost half the time. Like, there are going to be stretches in both directions for him. But again, sometimes if you get lucky and you get those stretches, the hot stretch during the playoffs, like, he's the type of guy who, if he's playing like his ceiling for a stretch of 3 weeks and it happens in October, that completely changes the entire equation when you go into a series in the playoffs. So I still wouldn't say I'm a full Garrett Mitchell believer by any stretch of the imagination, but I am a little bit closer to saying that there probably is a decent amount of value here, even in the offensive side of things, despite, you always get the defense. The base running is make of it what you will. I don't think he's the greatest base runner, but he's so fast that it makes up for a lot of it. So he's still probably a positive base runner in most cases. And you get crazy hustle. Like he almost beat a ball again this week on a grounder to first. I was like, how is he almost safe on that? Like, it's unbelievable to watch him sometimes. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't consider myself like a big part of the Garrett Mitchell believer or fan club, but I'm starting to see his value a little bit more on the offensive side because the highs are genuinely about as good as they get.
Game 2, Brewers would win this one by a final of 9-4. Kind of an eventful game here, starting with Brandon Sproat. Seems like every single Brandon Sproat outing, there's stuff to talk about. This was just an interesting one in so many different ways because he diced through the first 3 innings. He went 9 up, 9 down with a lot of swing and miss. He was only throwing 4-seamers, which this is the first time that that's ever happened. We've talked about how he's just had a very hard time commanding the sinker. He did not use it at all the entire first time through the batting order. It was all 4-seam fastballs, and he threw it like almost 70% of the time. He was getting swing and miss. He was getting some pop-ups. But he was also kind of spraying the 4-seamer too and just getting some really bad swings against it. So I don't even know if you could say that he was actually looking that good through the first 3, but the results were electric, and he was doing it with a way different pitch mix. Then the 4th inning rolls around. He had some cramping in the 4th that knocked him out mid-inning. He walked 2 guys in the 4th, gave up a grand slam. It just completely fell apart on him. And again, maybe you can trace some of that back to, well, he wasn't quite as good as it looked in the first few innings, even though the swings were really bad. I do think that these last 2 games, for sure, you could kind of see more of the benefit that the Brewers are getting of just facing a bad lineup. Like, the Guardians are not a good lineup right now. They're not a good lineup on the season, and now they've lost Jose Ramirez for the foreseeable future. That really puts a dent in their batting order. I think you could kind of see it with some of the really bad swings against Sproat when he was just kind of spraying around 98-mile-an-hour 4-seamers with bad shapes, and then it fell apart in the 4th. Pat Murphy had some harsh words for him after the game, basically saying that it just can't, even with the cramping, it just cannot fall apart like this. He said that whatever the focus level was, it was not good enough. That can't happen, and it has to change. So even for a guy departing with injury, that still pretty harsh words and some harsh public feedback that he's getting there. So it just a strange outing, and it's Brandon Sproat is just so confusing this year because even when you think you're seeing some signs of progress, he just has had a tendency to give it right back very quickly.
Yeah, it is. It's very confusing. The whole thing is confusing. Murph said, he'll be ready for his next start. I'm curious if that actually is going to be in the big leagues or if that might be in Nashville with Woodruff returning. They're going to need a rotation spot of some sort. They could obviously just send down a reliever again, and they very well might do that. That's very possible. But this is now multiple times lately that Murph has been pretty outwardly negative in talking about Brandon Sproat's outings. Now, in Vegas, he was fantastic against all odds. He had a fantastic start in Vegas. So I'm guessing they're not going to send him to Nashville right now, but it does feel like that leash is getting shorter, at least in Pat Murphy's eyes. Now, whether it will be his decision in the end to keep Brandon Sproat in the big leagues or not, I'm not sure, but I think it's starting to get a little bit closer to the end of that rope, and with Woodruff getting healthy, we'll see on the Logan Henderson timeline and everything else, but Drowan looks like he deserves to stay in the rotation. Robert Gasser's got a pretty good argument to stay in the rotation right now. Coleman Crow will come off the IL. I think he'd probably have not as good of a case at the moment, at least. But I don't know. It is getting closer to that point where I think it would not surprise me if he ends up in Nashville soon. And I don't think that says anything about his future still. I still think there's quite a bit to like with Brandon Sproat. And I think eventually they will at least get a pretty good version of him out of him. But it might take some extra time in AAA to work through some of this, figure out some of the command, figure out maybe in a lighter setting some of the stuff they want him to work through, and maybe it'll be better for everyone in the end if that does happen. But yeah, I'm not saying it will happen, but it's just it feels like it's getting closer, and a couple more starts like this, I can't imagine him surviving those at the big league level.
We did mention that Chad Patrick had a big bounce back, and he was instrumental in the Brewers winning this one. Like I said, he kind of changed the direction of the game for the worse in his last outing. He changed the direction of this game for the better in this one because he delivered 3 1/3 out of the bullpen, only gave up 1 hit, 1 walk, punched out 7, getting a lot of whiff with the fastballs. Just really good stuff for him attacking the zone. So a big bounce back for Chad Patrick. Aaron Ashby getting another outing in this one, picking up a hold, and then Grant Anderson taking it home in a lower leverage situation. Looking on the offensive side here, the biggest note that I have from this one is Christian Yelich. So Oppo homer to lead off the game, and then he had an RBI single a couple innings later. Both of those pitches were backdoor curveballs from a right-hander. We had talked last week about how one of the biggest areas where you can see Yelich looking like someone who's on the downswing or his body just isn't doing the things that it used to, swinging over the top of right-handed breaking balls. I looked at it as he was collecting these hits. He was slugging 118 against right-handed breaking balls this year. That he's been way better against lefty breaking balls, believe it or not, than righty breaking balls. Just the ball with some depth coming back in toward him, just cannot get on plane with that to save his life. But he did it twice in this one. So he homered, hit the base hit. Was kind of surprised that they came back with basically the exact same pitch that he homered on. But again, you maybe I can kind of see it if you look at how badly he struggled against that pitch, and maybe it's like, okay, you need to actually prove to me that you can do it again, and maybe that's what happened there. But he did it, so kind of big to see him at least getting to that pitch. You know, there's a lot of things that don't mean much in a small sample, but this is one of the things where I'm still not going to say a ton about it, but when you've seen this pretty consistent trend for a guy and then he breaks it, like hitting these specific pitches, I'm going to put a star next to that and kind of see how that develops.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We have to see how it continues to go, but I do know that, he's going to figure stuff out. He's a smart enough guy. The Brewers have good hitting coaches who are going to be at least explaining to him, like, hey, this is something that is causing you issues, and they're probably going to continue to attack it. Yelich is probably going to find a way to at least work through that and find a way to kind of compete against it. I do wonder, and I know on Twitter I saw you kind of point out that like it was anywhere in the zone that he had struggled against these, but I do wonder if just with some of the tilt of the bat, where a breaking ball going away from him, he doesn't really have to adjust the swing plane, like from a lefty. I mean, he doesn't have to adjust the swing plane much because the bat is already tilted down, and that's where the ball's headed. And he has to get more tilt and get it more vertical if he's going to get to the ones that are under his hands. But a backdoor one is one he can kind of keep that same natural tilt on the plane. So I'm curious if that will be something that he shows he can handle a little bit better right now than the ones that are actually down and in more. And I should also point out, like, that isn't the down and in part isn't totally new. Even the very best version of Christian Yelich, it felt like that was the one way you could get him, was with those breaking balls that were they weren't strikes like they are right now, but the ones that were kind of the back foot ones, and not even that, just down below the zone to the inside. It always felt like that was where you could kind of go get him at times, even at his best. But yeah, right now, we talked about it last week, it's become a much bigger issue, and it includes zone sliders, bad zone sliders that are even just kind of hanging there waiting for him to hit them, and he just hasn't really been able to get to them. So it is encouraging. It's something, at least to see, it's something that we should be keeping an eye on, and if it continues to trend well, he'll probably have a much better, at least in terms of the process, the numbers will start to look a lot better if he does start to actually be able to do anything against right-handed breaking balls.
It was a night of firsts for Cooper Pratt in his second career big league game. First career hit, first career RBI, first career run scored, first career stolen base. You can check off a bunch of them in this one. After that first career hit, he advanced to second on a sac bunt by David Hamilton, and that's when Yelich hit that RBI single. Spencer, I know you really hyped up Cooper Pratt's base running. This was one where he got a pretty good read on it. It was not an insanely hard read, I don't think, because I went back and I looked at the replay, and I do think it cleared Short's head a little more than it looked from the camera angle if you look a little more closely. But still, like, line drives are going to be the hardest ones to read, especially line drives where you just have an infielder in the vicinity of it. And again, it's not like this ball was hit crazy hard either. So it's not like he could just see it rifle over the guy's head and be able to take off right away. But he said post game, like, I read it right away. I knew it was going over his head. So I just took off, and he was able to score from second on a hit that's not necessarily an auto score. So I think you could kind of see that example right away of, he's not a crazy fast guy, but he knows how to do little things like that, and you can see the impact there.
Yeah, I would agree. I went back and I had seen it too. I think it was a little bit higher than I thought initially, but that isn't an easy read, and you don't really know, especially with a guy on second and the shortstop's kind of the one that's, moving in and out, trying to keep you close, keep you honest as a base runner. You don't necessarily know exactly where they are when the ball is hit. But the thing with it was he didn't even second guess it for a second. He took off and he peeked back just to make sure he kind of knew where it had ended up, I think. But there was not a second of like a stutter or anything. It was just the ball was hit and he took off immediately. The speed is going to be interesting. I don't know. I haven't looked. I don't know if we even have any sprint speed metrics that would be publicly available yet. Watching him in person on Tuesday when I was at the game, he was moving faster than I was expecting him to look. Just I've seen him mostly I saw him in Appleton, but that was a brief series, and I never really got to see him open it up and run full speed. It will be interesting. It might be a little bit faster than I was thinking initially, just based on the eye test. He's got long strides and stuff too, which helps just with the size. But either way, the main positive that he's going to bring is the IQ and everything on that side of the ball. Like, he stole about 90% of bases successfully in the minors, and while it is easier to steal bases in the minor leagues, and I wouldn't expect it to be quite that good at the big league level, at least not at that volume, that's still a really high success rate for minor league base runners. Like, that's not common for anybody, even the fastest guys in the minor leagues. And to do it at a high volume means he wasn't just taking advantage of like very obvious situations or first and thirds where they're maybe not even going to make a throw or whatever. Like, he was stealing regularly and doing it at a very high success rate. So I think we are going to see some pretty good base running. And I think this was a nice little taste of like what it can look like, because I think there's a lot of players who, even if they got that initial read in their second game in the big leagues and felt good about it, would have a really hard time trusting it, like completely, and just no second guessing, no turning and going like, okay, wait a second, did I get that wrong? No kind of stopping for a split second. Like, there was none of that. He just took off immediately. So I think we are going to see stuff like that. I think he's going to bring some value in that way. And it was kind of funny. I heard you ask him the question in post game, and you could tell he was kind of like, what do you mean? I was
Yeah, he didn't get it at first. I could have asked the
No.
question a little better probably, but yeah, I had to kind of follow up like, well, did you get a read there? Like, it's a line drive over Short's head. Looked like it kind of floated out there.
Yeah, but I think just in his mind, like, that's the type of stuff he just does very naturally. And to him, it's like, yeah, that's an obvious, like, yeah, I'm going on that. And for a lot of players, I don't really think that would be the case, especially in their second game in the big league. So that's the type of stuff that I think, noticing that as a fan, while you might be noticing some struggles at the plate, but also picking up on some of the smaller things he's probably going to do well, that'll probably help get through some of the struggles that probably will come offensively too.
A couple more notes from this one on offense. Like we said, Pratt delivering some firsts we talked about earlier. You can kind of see he's got that opposite of field approach going right now. Let the ball get deep. That first career hit, it was a ground ball that got through the 4-3 hole. And then his RBI base hit a couple innings later was a line drive through the right side as well. So you can kind of already see. I think in a lot of ways, this game was kind of a microcosm of how it's going to look this year and the ways it can be productive. Like, First couple games, 2 for 5 or whatever he was with 2 singles. It's not an amazing line by any stretch of the imagination, but it gets the job done. He took some extra bases in a couple of cool ways, stole a base in this one as well late in the game. The first, second to home in the way that he was able to get the read off the bat. Little things like that. I think this is a good example of how it's going to look this season for him. One more note from this one from a guy who does look like he's starting to get closer to the ceiling. Jackson Chourio, another home run in this one. This time it was a opposite field homer on a high fastball. Talked a lot about just the quick hands and how he's got the ability to get to a lot of pitches that other hitters can't, and not only get to them, but get to them with authority. Another example here, but we've seen him get hot before, but the swing decisions have quietly gotten very, very good all of a sudden when probably as recently as like 10 days ago, they looked really bad, about as bad as they had been. Now they're probably looking about as good as they've ever been because the chase is way down. The zone swing is way up. Seems like he's playing a little bit freer at the plate, at least. It has not looked great in the outfield. He had another home run that he probably should have at least gotten closer to getting a glove on or getting close to robbing. Kind of played it funny at the wall again, but looks like he's playing with some freedom on offense, but also just a little more disciplined and making some better decisions, and you're seeing that show up in the results.
If he makes solid swing decisions, he's going to be a star. Like, it's going to be star numbers. He just has to make solid swing decisions. Like, these are really good of late. I still don't necessarily expect him to settle into that type of range long term. But if they're average or better with the way he can impact the ball to all fields on pitches thrown anywhere in the zone, it's going to be very, very good. And you're going to be really, really happy with the offensive results that you're getting. And yeah, to touch on that home run, I saw a lot of people who were like really mad he didn't catch it. I would say any ball that doesn't hit the top of the wall is pretty hard to expect a home run robbery on like that. That's where we're getting, that's pretty tough. And I will also say the ball, when it's hit as high as a ball was like this one, I think that gets more difficult to time it and to find where you are and to be able to build a little momentum into catching it. I think it's easier when you're actually kind of not full-blown sprinting, but when you can give yourself a little momentum and kind of time it up. It's harder to do when a ball is as high as this one was and up there for a while. But this is like the third time he's caught himself or caught his glove on the wall. And that is where it's like, okay, we got to figure out how to get just a better idea of where we are when we jump, because I think a lot of people believe he just can't jump, and that's not it. He just keeps getting caught every time he goes up. Like, if you think about it, especially with the jerseys they wear combined with that padding, that stuff just sticks together. So if you catch it on your way up, especially the back of it, you just don't go anywhere. Like, you're just going to stick and fall right back down. And if your glove hits, it's the same thing. Your body's not going to let you go much higher because you're already bending your arm back. Your glove hits the wall and you just stick. You don't go anywhere. So figuring out how to maybe feel for that wall a little bit more. And it is harder whenever you're going to your glove side to do that. It's a lot easier when you can reach out the bare hand and kind of get a feel for the wall while you're getting ready to jump too. You get to put the arm up away from the wall. So it's always a little easier going to like the arm side when you're doing that type of stuff. But 3 separate times now that you've gotten your glove caught on the wall, like, you do have to kind of start to figure that out and at least start to give a little bit of a better effort, because again, I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to rob home runs. And I really don't when it lands behind the fence. Like, when it hits the top of the fence, I think it's like, yeah, okay, if you were there, you probably should have had a pretty good chance of catching it. But this one landed in the bullpen. It didn't hit the top of the fence, and that's a tough catch no matter what. But the fact that it wasn't close is where I understand some of the frustration with it. So figuring out how to time that up a little bit better, how to make sure he's got a little more space when he makes his leap, it will help. He's also 22. He's still only been playing outfield since he was about 17. There's going to be growing pains with some of the really small intricacies of this type of stuff. And I do think he'll eventually figure it out. He's a very good athlete who I think it'll end up being something that's, I'm not saying he'll become Lorenzo Cain or Keon Broxton out there, or Blake Perkins, but I think he'll figure out how to maneuver the wall a little bit better as time goes on.
An ugly game in game 3 to close out the homestand. An ugly game in which there were only 6 runs scored, which maybe contributes to how ugly it was because everybody was ugly at everything. Brewers dropping this one 4-2. The Guardians walked 9. The Brewers walked 8. And again, like I said, despite those walks, neither side really fully capitalizing on those at all. Shane Drowan, we talked about how his last start was so much better than the line looked. This start was a lot worse than the line looked. 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 run. Like I said, I think these last 2 games, you really saw the Brewers just take advantage of a bad lineup where their starters really did not pitch that well or throw the ball that competitively. But when they were in the strike zone, the Guardians just could not hit it, or they left the strike zone when they shouldn't have. And that's kind of what happened a little bit more in this one. Shane Drowan's zone rate, so percentage of pitches in the strike zone over 5 innings, was 40% in this one, including 31% with his 2-seamer, or it's a 1-seamer technically, 48% with his 4-seamer, so not even establishing the strike zone with his fastballs. It's not like he was throwing a ton of spin designed to get chases. Not in the strike zone a lot. We saw a lot of what we saw in the last start, more of, I think, in this one, where he got to 2 strikes and then the ball was just nowhere close and he couldn't put guys away that way. But I think today it was more just a general command problem where he was really fighting things. And Pat Murphy said post-game, yeah, he just didn't have his best. 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, gave up a homer. But again, the Guardians just not really hitting him much to take advantage of that. He only gave up 3 hits in this one, so just 1 run. But like I said, I think you could, to more accurately reflect how he threw the ball in each of these 2 starts, I think you could basically kind of flip these 2 lines, where I think he basically deserved this line in his first start, and he deserved the line from the first start in this one. So like we said, it has a tendency to even out. Not always this quickly, but kind of funny that it happened this quickly for quite a few guys in the last couple weeks here for these starts. But the Guardians did a lot of their damage. Like I said, not really taking advantage of opportunities. They just hit 3 solo homers, and then Drew Rom threw a wild pitch later in the game to make it 4-2. It was Joel Kuhnel first out of the bullpen. He gave up a solo home run, and the Brewers had to use their B bullpen in this one. Just did not go great. I think the funniest part of this one, though, is, like I said, the Brewers issued 8 walks. Every pitcher who appeared in this game issued a free base, except Craig Yoho. Craig Yoho delivered a score this inning with 2 strikeouts, and the base hit that he gave up had like a 50x batting average. So Craig Yoho was very, very good, arguably the most competitive of the 5 pitchers who threw today, which is funny because that's basically been the knock on him by the Brewers, and the explanation for why is he not getting more opportunities. It's because everything moves so much and he's just not competitive with it. But he's been fine, I think, so far. Now, going into this one, I did double check it. Like, the zone rate had actually been lower so far this year than his cup of coffee last year before this outing, but it's a very small sample. Interesting to see how good it looked in this one. I think he needs to kind of stack some of these together, though, before you start seeing a change in how he's used.
Yeah, and the first 2 outings both came at Coors, I believe, right? So I would take all of it with a little bit of a grain of salt, and now it's just a small sample in general, but this looked more like the guy it's a 1-inning sample, but it looked a lot more like the guy I envisioned pitching for the Brewers coming up through the system, like, and doing it very quickly. So it all happened in a span of like a year. But this is what I envisioned. Like, the swing and miss was there, soft contact on the balls in play, around the zone enough to get that swing and miss and to get the swings that you want to get against this changeup. And the velo seemed to be up a little bit today, but it's there. It is all there. Like, he can be a good big league reliever. And I understand, we talked about it last time, or maybe 2 episodes ago now, but I get it to an extent with some of the pitch shapes and how big they are and everything else. Like, I do get it, but I also think giving him a little bit of leeway to work through some stuff at the big league level and see how it comes out would be more than fair at this point, because he's got nothing left to gain from being in AAA, nothing to prove from being in Nashville. He's going to get a ton of chase down there. There's no question about it. He always does. He's been the zone rate was a lot better this year in AAA. I just think let's give him the opportunity to show if he can actually do it at the big league level. And let's do it for a few weeks at least. Like, let's see what he can do. You've got all these injuries in the pen. You've got some guys who aren't necessarily pitching great. Give him the opportunity. And it can be outings like this, but like you said, he needs to stack some. Let's give him the chance to. That's what I'm asking for. Like, that's what I'm hoping for. Give him the opportunity to stack some of these and see where it goes. And if it doesn't, after a couple weeks and a couple outings just go really off the rails and it just doesn't look right, then I think it's very reasonable to say we're going to send him back to Nashville. And at that point, I would understand, maybe it's time to move on and give somebody else a chance to try and maximize Craig Yoho and get some value out of him in that way by moving him at the deadline or something. But for now, I would really like to see him get the opportunity because an injury happened. He got a chance to come right back to the big leagues after being sent down. I would just like this seems like the time right now where you can give him that chance and see where it lands.
You made the point that I was going to tie into one of our listener questions from @olderpotato on Twitter, who asked, how are you feeling about the bullpen in general? Maybe I've been spoiled by excellent pens in the past, but this current iteration doesn't fill me with confidence for the postseason. And I think that ties back to the point that you made. Maybe this is the time to say, hey, can Craig Yoho change that a little bit? Because I do think he's right. This is not nearly as deep as what the Brewers were working with in the past. And part of it is injury. You've got some guys who are down. Part of it is some of the guys have had to move back into the rotation, like Drowan is starting now instead of pitching out of the bullpen. So we kind of have talked about this before where we've both said, yeah, it's not amazing right now, but we think it's going to be fine because they have enough guys who, when they have even a decent sample of them healthy, you kind of just plug them into some different roles, give them some different opportunities. I just think it's going to come together. And to me, like, this is where getting Crow back, maybe get Henderson back in a few weeks. Where do they slot in? How can you move some other guys around? To me, there's enough arms here to make this work. And again, they're going to trade for a reliever at the deadline because they always do. Now, their deadline reliever additions have not been particularly impactful lately. Maybe they're due to hit on a Drew Pomeranz this year. I don't know. But this is also maybe why Craig Yoho should get a little more leeway going into the deadline, because you kind of need to have an idea of what do we have here. And Yoho is probably one of their biggest wild cards where the stuff is absolutely disgusting. The stuff is big league ready. It's going to miss bats if it's competitive. Is it going to be competitive enough? He needs, I think, more than 2 or 3 disjointed outings to prove that. And I also think the Brewers are like in a decent position to try that right now. Like True Blood wrote about it a little bit, saying, they can't take their foot off the gas necessarily, but they're sitting in a pretty good spot here where they have a decent lead, not a huge one. I don't think the teams behind them have their best baseball ahead of them. I think it's more likely that teams like the Cardinals and the Pirates have already played some of their best baseball. So, to me, this is something where, again, I do understand why they haven't given it the opportunity, the consistent opportunity, and I can understand why they'd maybe need to see a little bit more before they do that. But this does kind of feel like the chance to just maybe see an opening and say, hey, maybe we give him a chance to see if he can run with it.
Yeah, I'm with you for sure. I was just looking at bullpen stats across the league for the teams, and it is funny because I'm in the same boat where it's like, man, this doesn't feel like it's a very
statistically, it's been pretty good, hasn't it? Because I looked at the numbers like a few days ago.
Yeah, it's been very good. Now, this is coming into today, and it's kind of bunched up, so they may have dropped a couple with a couple homers and 3 earned runs on the bullpen today, but they were 6th in ERA, 2nd in FIP, 5th in XFIP, 5th in xERA. So, like, in terms of the actual results, and then obviously FIP and some of the peripheral stuff too, they've been very good. I think the difference is that, well, McGill's been awesome since that really slow start. it doesn't feel the same as most years because you don't feel like you have that very dominant back end of the bullpen that they've showed in the past. And almost every other year, despite a lot of the tough playoff endings kind of coming at the hands of some of the best relievers, you kind of always went into the playoffs feeling like, okay, I mean, you get to the 8th and 9th with a lead, it's almost a shoe-in. And those two guys at the back end are just almost always going to be guys that you could see them striking out 6 batters, and that's the game. You don't really have that feeling. And again, the current iteration of McGill is closer to that, and way closer to that than I thought it was going to be a couple months ago. But it does feel like if they are going to actually go out and make a bullpen move, this might be the year they go for somebody who's a bigger name, not necessarily sticking with the Daniel Norris. Obviously, Drew Pomeranz worked out incredibly well, but they've kind of tried to recreate that most years, and it just hasn't gone super well. I think Shelby Miller was taking a shot on a guy they thought could be a legit, leverage guy and for not a huge cost. But it wouldn't shock me if this is the year, and I'm not going to throw out a ton of names, but like, I think Aroldis Chapman's going to be available. I'm not sure how I feel in terms of, all the non-baseball stuff with Aroldis Chapman. That's a different discussion, but the Brewers have been tied to him multiple times in the past. I believe it was reported when the Pirates signed him that the Brewers were like second. I believe when the Royals traded for him, the Brewers may have finished second in that running as well. It just kind of feels like it might happen this year where they feel like that's a guy they could put at the end of their bullpen and kind of change how that dynamic works. Who knows? It just wouldn't shock me if they get a little bit more of a well-known commodity at the back end of the pen this year, because I think that's the difference right now between most of the pens we're used to. They're doing well overall, but they just don't have those bigger names that everyone kind of knows. And the Brewers don't care about a bigger name, but I mean it more in terms of like, this guy's a shutdown reliever that we feel very confident is going to get you the 3 outs to end a game or to get you to the 9th almost every time.
HC Purdy asks, what do you guys think about bringing back Brent Suter as a bullpen option? I think the Angels would be sellers. He would not be expensive. His ERA is okay. He gives hitters a different look. Also very entertaining and funny. So that last part notwithstanding, I don't know what Brent Suter would bring that Chad Patrick wouldn't bring, or that Coleman Crow pitching out of the bullpen wouldn't bring, or if Logan Henderson moves back to the bullpen because that's just where it's at in the rotation, or maybe Drowan does move back to the bullpen and Henderson gets a rotation spot when he's healthy. Like, I think they have enough guys who are capable of that. Hell, I think Gerson Garabito could pitch out of the bullpen for this team and be fine and give them like a 3.6 ERA as a multi-inning reliever. When we talk about the bullpen, that's actually kind of a name that I've been looking at a lot more lately because he's healthy now. I had my eye on him as kind of a dark horse. This is the guy who steps up and makes a bunch of really solid starts for them this year. Looks like that's not panning out after the injury that he had early in the year. He's pitching out of the pen in Nashville right now. But it's looked good in Nashville so far when he has pitched out of the pen. So I was almost kind of wondering after the Sproat injury, like if it's an IL, would Garabito be the next man up? Because McGee is stretching back out in Nashville, and he pitched on the same night that Sproat got hurt. They have an open 40 spot now, so they could add him to the 40 and kind of go from there and, just see what he's able to give you. So that's kind of another name that I have on my radar too. But as far as deadline acquisitions go, yeah, that would just seem kind of redundant to me. I think they would probably guess that they can get that kind of production from guys internally who are either coming back or could come up from Nashville, and you can do that without having to give up even the very, very low level lottery ticket prospect that it would cost to bring a guy like that back in a trade.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I said, not to reiterate the whole thing, but I think if they do go get a pen arm, it's either going to be somebody that they view as like a high ceiling guy, like I think they thought they had in like a Daniel Norris type of arm, or a guy who is more proven as a legitimate leverage arm already. So that's more where I think they'll focus for bullpen guys.
Terry asks, any inside story on Joel Kuhnel's velo bump? Although Chris Hook said on MLB Network that they didn't do anything, I have a hard time buying that. Oh, this is going to disappoint. This is going to disappoint some people. I don't actually think they sprinkled magic pixie dust on him. Maybe he's moving a little differently. I don't know. Might try to ask some people in Cincinnati next week, but I just don't see any feasible way they could have done anything with him yet, because he came out, he literally got there and started throwing 100 the day of, basically. Like, I just don't know what you would change in that amount of time. So I'm not sure there really is a magic answer. And I should also note that since they got out of Vegas, it's been more like 97 than sitting 99, which I think is a much more reasonable. Like, oh, he went from almost 95 to 97. Like, that's a
Mhm.
little more feasible for an in-season jump. The weather's getting warmer. You can start to explain that in some other ways. So I think the Vegas environment was probably boosting it a little bit on top of what were maybe already some real, more natural gains that weren't necessarily like a pixie dust lab moment, which I'm going to keep saying this, like the lab is not what people think the lab is. The lab is more diagnostic. Like, yes, they have a lab. They can send guys in there. They can throw their bullpen at the beginning of the year, and you can see, all these metrics on how their stuff moves. You can see the biomechanics of it all. But they can also take a lot of that stuff with them. Like, they have the pitch tracking tech on them when they're in games. They have it on them when they're throwing bullpens in the bullpen at American Family Field or on the road. They can take the tech with them. And then they're doing most of their work like during their flat grounds every single day when the Brewers are taking BP or taking infield. The pitchers are out there in right field. Chris Hook is out there with him. Juan Sandoval's out there with him. Jim Henderson's out there with him. I can see it every day. These guys are throwing their flat grounds. Chris Hook is doing all kinds of mechanical gestures out there and all kinds of stuff. Like, that is where they're doing the work. They're not doing the work in some top secret room in the back of the stadium. It's not quite as exciting as I think people like to drum it up to, or not as futuristic or techie or secretive, I think, as people like to drum it up. Yes, the Brewers have secrets. Yes, there are things that even when I ask about them, they will tell me we're not going to tell you this because we don't want people to know this. But not all of that stuff is happening in some back room, teched out, super crazy futuristic exclusive lab. And in Joel Kuhnel's case, like I said, I think you can, now that we've seen it a little more, and now that we've seen how it's looking outside of Vegas where everything was just insane, I think it's a lot more explainable now, and it's not just, oh my God, they had to have done something with him. I'm not really sure they did yet.
Yeah, I believe Chris Hook basically just said, like, yeah, all we did was say hello, like,
Mhm.
and he was suddenly touching 100 in Vegas. But I would imagine there was also an element seeing him speak to the media before that first series with the Brewers against the A's. He didn't seem overly thrilled about getting DFA'd by the A's and felt like he had pitched pretty well and probably didn't feel like he deserved to have been DFA'd. So I'm sure there's a combo of the Vegas air, what seems to be a legitimate jump, and also kind of just being pissed off at the A's and all of that, and kind of all of that combined into suddenly we're seeing triple digits. But like you said, 97, I mean, that's still a legitimate jump. That's a couple miles per hour in season, which you don't see a ton of, but it is more understandable. There could be just a little bit more freedom in being with a new organization, an organization who clearly wanted him and sought him out and has had him in the past and he had a little familiarity with. But yeah, I don't think there's any secret recipe going on here. I don't think there's anything that's just off the radar that nobody's seeing. Like, it, I think it just kind of happened. And I would venture to guess that the Brewers are kind of as surprised as everybody else that it happened, at least at this point in time. And yeah, we don't need to rehash the whole lab thing, but it is funny. I don't know if I've said it on this one. I made that pitching lab go burr meme go like,
so you're responsible for this.
Listen, I made that like 3 years ago for Yorman Galindez when he was pitching for the Mudcats at that point. And I hate that meme now. And it gets posted everywhere. And I'm like, that was me. I did that. I feel bad about it. I don't like it. It was funny in the moment because I was making fun of it. But now everyone's using it as like oh yeah, this is the lab. And like you said, it's not what the lab is. Like the lab, we've talked about it, but the lab's not even in. They might have a version of the lab in Milwaukee now, but it was in Arizona. Like this is something that they used in spring for rehabbing guys, for guys that they maybe just acquired in the offseason that they wanted to get some of the more biometric data on. But it's not something that they're just constantly in and using to make players better. Like that, what they're doing is working with the players to maximize what they're good at and how their bodies move. But they're doing it in a very informal setting, mostly out in the outfield grass, like you said.
Maybe one of these days I'll take a video like start to finish of everything the pitchers do during the day out on the field, like not up close, but just so people can see that they're not like disappearing into some top secret room. Yes, they do disappear for a little bit for meetings and all this kind of stuff, but they're not hanging out in some top secret lab all the time. Tyler asks, what is the realistic debut window for Luis Lara? So we talked about last week, another guy who signed an extension could be up in the near future. Garrett Mitchell has been really good in June, he says, and while Sal Frelick has regressed a ton, both at the plate and the outfield, it's hard to picture Murph and Arnold deciding to option Sal or trade him midseason. Spencer, this can be kind of a seg into our sandbox, but as our resident prospect expert, what do you think it's going to take for Luis Lara to reach the big leagues this year?
Yeah, I can't remember if I said it last week or what. I said it on something I was on. I think he's up around the All-Star break. I do think we end up seeing him around that time. If there's an injury, especially a longer-term injury to a guy like Frelick, I think you probably see him before that. But it just feels to me like he's going to end up here and probably facing lefties regularly and then giving Mitchell and Frelick some days off intermittently against righties. And I don't think it's super far into the future. I don't think it's like next week, but I think before the deadline, there's a pretty good chance you see him up and playing pretty regularly, but not as like a full-blown Cooper Pratt. He's the everyday shortstop, but playing like 4 to 5 times a week, I think that's plenty to get a guy a lot of experience at the big league level. Also having a really good pinch runner on the bench, a guy who can pinch hit against lefties if needed in certain situations. But I think he'll play quite a bit. It just won't necessarily be quite the level of like Cooper Pratt's. Just insert him in the shortstop and that's your guy. I do think it's going to happen. I have no inside info. I have no idea. It just, to me, that feels like the timeline, especially with Lockridge kind of being a question mark now. I think that ups the odds for him. The thing is, Perkins has looked better against lefties of late, especially. He was already better against, he's always been better against lefties, but obviously the Christopher Sanchez game, he had a double today against the lefty. So that does make it a little more interesting because obviously Pat Murphy loves Blake Perkins for good reason. There's a lot to like about Blake Perkins. And with Blake, you can kind of just feel comfortable having him sit the bench the vast majority of the time, and then you just bring him in when it makes sense or when it's needed. You don't want to do that with Lara, but I just think he's going to kind of force his way into the plans because of how good he's been in AAA. And Frelick's been a little bit better of late. He's swinging the bat a little bit better of late. I remain convinced that Sal Frelick has never quite recovered from whatever the oblique thing was that happened in April. I have no real proof of that, but I see him stretching it out all the time during games, and he just doesn't look right to me. I remember a throw like a week ago that like 5-hopped into William Contreras, and he has a good arm. He did make a pretty strong throw in this Cleveland series when he had the opportunity to. So maybe it's getting a little bit better now, and he is swinging the bat a little bit better, but he just doesn't quite look right to me. And I'm not saying that would fix all his issues, but I just think Lara is going to force his way up by that All-Star break time. I think he's just going to be hard to keep in AAA for too much longer than that.
And with that, we can fully seg into the minor league sandbox.
All right. We got a few questions for the sandbox this time around. Alex asked, since the minor league season is almost at the half season mark, who are Spencer's highest risers in the system and who are his quote-unquote darling prospects, meaning prospects that are undervalued nationally but evaluated, ranked more favorably by myself. So biggest risers, Josiah Ragsdale is definitely one of them. I wasn't super high on him coming into the year. I didn't love what I saw last year. He seemed like he was just kind of a slap hitter. He's added some pop. He's got 4 homers now after one yesterday. He's got like an 880 OPS at the high A level. He's risen pretty far up, and he's on some actual national ranked lists now too. Juan Martinez, I'm going to talk about him a little bit later, but he has gone from outside like my top 100 to being bordering on like a top 30 guy with how well he's performing in the ACL after repeating in the DSL last year. 19 years old, really interesting profile. Brewers-Pedia, I think, put out some video of him today, so you can see some of the swings on that. Jaden Dubanowitz has really risen up my list. He was already relatively high, but coming out and touching 98 now, after previously kind of topping out at 95. It's just the off speed are interesting. He's throwing harder. He's got big extension. He's a really interesting one. And then Braylon Owens, their 10th round pick last year. He's not like super highly ranked for me right now. He's not somebody that I would put in my top 30 or 40. But he was somebody who's pretty much off my radar coming into the year. And he has been really, really solid. Probably the best pitcher in high A for the Brewers this year. They've had success with college 4-year guys who they sign for low money amounts. He gets a ton of whiff. He has a ton of strikeouts. He's definitely gone up my list quite a bit. The darling prospects one is tough because I will give the national people a ton of credit. I used to have a lot more disagreements with them. I still have disagreements, but they're not like huge ones. So it's harder for me to pick these guys. But like Handelfrey Encarnacion to me is a no doubt top 30 guy in the Brewers system. I think he might be on Baseball America's top 30 now. But for me, like he should be on all of them pretty unanimously, pretty easily. Jaron DeBerry, I have in, I think the top, he's like 16th or 17th for me right now. That's higher than I think anybody else has him. Fangraphs has him in the 24 range, I believe. I just really like Jaron DeBerry. I think there's a very good arm there that's going to be a big league pitcher at some point. And then Josh Adamszewski, this one's kind of cheating too, I feel like, but he's my 5th overall right now. I don't think anyone has him that high. Pipeline might be getting closer because I think or Baseball America might have put him in their top 100 recently. But to me, I've always been very high on him. And then at one point it got kind of funny because I think national rankings actually passed me on him. I love the bat. I've always loved the bat. I like the base running, but I never knew what the defense was going to look like or where he would fit. I think he's going to fit in left field. And while that is a very specific defensive home and not a premium one, I think he's going to be an above average left field defender. And then he's going to hit by far well enough to handle that spot from the offensive point of view. So those would be my guys. I mean, there are other sleepers I've talked about on other ones, but those would be the main ones. AM Go Blue asks, when and where are Made and Pena going to play in the show? If they plan to trade one, which one would you pick and why? So I've talked about it before. I would trade Pena first. Between the two of them, it's not super close for me. I like Pena quite a bit. The passing out issue, the sickness stuff, that would concern me a little bit more as well now. So he's a pretty easy choice for me. I think Made's up at some point in 2027. And I think he's probably at third base now that Cooper Pratt seems to be pretty locked in at short. Pena, I would guess 2028. And he's looked a lot better in the infield this year. So I will give him credit for that. I still think he ends up in the outfield longer term. So my guess is when he does end up in the big leagues, he's an outfielder, maybe second base. But that'd be my guess on those two. Older Potato asked, which prospects, if any, are most at risk of getting traded due to a combination of Rule 5 eligibility and roster crunch? The tough part is a lot of the guys I'm going to list, or a couple of the guys I'm going to list here, aren't probably going to have a ton of value. Brock Wilken is Rule 5 eligible. No one's going to take him with how he's looked in AAA, but I wouldn't be shocked if a team would want to try and buy low on him and see if they could figure out what to do with him. I don't think there'd be a ton of value there. Brett Witrowski is very similar. I could see a team taking a shot on him just because he's been up to triple digits with the fastball. The breaking stuff is good. The command's not good, and the fastball shape is very bad. But if you think you could tinker with the fastball shape, maybe make it a full-blown cutter all the time or something like that, maybe they could make it work that way. But I could see him getting moved for somebody if they buy the velo, especially in like a pen roll. Luke Adams is somebody that is going to be Rule 5 eligible, and given his on-base abilities and everything else, he does have a little bit of the profile that teams are willing to take a position player in the Rule 5 draft. They're pretty rare, but I could see it with a guy like Adams, so maybe somebody like that. I think the sneakiest one and the one that's most interesting is Jet Williams. I don't necessarily expect them to, but it hasn't been fantastic in AAA, and he's having a good week, and I'll talk about him in a minute here, but I think you could make a case that if there's a good deal out there, that it would make some sense to move him when you do have Midday coming up. You have Andrew Fisher, you have a bunch of guys coming through. You extended Lara, so like center field isn't really in the cards for Williams moving forward. It's tough. I think he's somebody that I could see being a headliner if they make a bigger move of some sort at the deadline. Moving into the batters from this week, or recent weeks at least, sticking on the DSL, we talked about a bunch of these guys last week. I'm just going to update a few of them. So Diego Frontado, he now has an 1167 OPS in the DSL with 4 homers. He's walked 12 times to only 8 strikeouts. He's 11 for 12 in stolen base attempts. It sounds like the batted ball data isn't jumping off the page yet. It's kind of just that type of power that probably won't play necessarily if he moves stateside right away, but that the angles are pretty decent and that there is going to be some development there for power to show up. So a good start for him. Leanders Matos, also very young. He's 16 until July 2nd here still. He has an 1128 OPS. He has 3 homers, 2 doubles, a triple, 7 walks to 9 strikeouts, and he's 6 for 6 in stolen base attempts. Have heard some pretty good stuff about his batted ball data. Little more juice in the bat for him so far, at least in terms of the homers. They've been a little bit more legitimate in terms of the actual exit velos, so that's exciting for a 16-year-old. Definitely one to keep an eye on. Sebastian Fernandez, talked about him last time. He's a catcher. He has a 1058 OPS so far, 3 homers, 2 doubles, 11 walks, 13 strikeouts, and he's thrown out 8 of 19 attempted base stealers. Ricky Monies, I mentioned he hit a grand slam last week, kind of the first time he'd done anything of note. He had a really good week. He's all the way up to a 950 OPS now, despite the very slow start. Today, he went 3 for 4 with a homer. It's been good to see him get going. Strikeouts are definitely a little higher than you'd want to see, but it's good to see him get going. It was a bad start. I like to remind people that Jackson Cheerio started 0 for 18 in the DSL when he was first coming through. So slow starts do happen at times. And then the last DSL bat I want to talk about is Herlin Payano. He is technically a repeat. He was in the 2025 signing class, but he only played in 6 games last year due to injury. He has an 1176 OPS. He has 4 homers. He's 5 for 7 on steals, 14 walks to only 6 strikeouts. He only turned 18 this month. It's rare that they move a bat stateside during the season, but man, if they're going to, he feels like the guy that might get that chance, especially if the guys I'm about to talk about here maybe get a chance to move to full season ball in the 2 guys I want to talk about from the ACL, and Juan Martinez and Alexander Frias. So they just both continue to mash. Juan Martinez hit for the cycle this past week. He's batting 381. He has an 1107 OPS. Alexander Frias is batting 407 with an 1144 OPS. They both just keep hitting. they need to get challenged, and putting them in Wilson makes the most sense to me. It's not a tiny sample anymore. This is a pretty good size sample to work with. They're too good for the ACL. Let's see how they struggle, what they do when they maybe don't get great results on every ball in play when they move to low A, but it's time for them to go there, both of them, I think. Jaden Fielder is up to a 786 OPS suddenly. He hit a homer yesterday. That OPS is very much carried by the walk rate, and I don't really buy that it's sustainable, but it's very good production, and it's a cool story. So I'm going to continue to root for Jaden Fielder to keep it going, because so far, in terms of production, it's been there at every level of the way. Andrew Fisher hit 2 homers this week, including one at the game I was at on Friday last week. And then he also hit one in his first at-bat in Double-A. So struck out once in the first game there. We're going to have to monitor the whiffs and the strikeouts again, but I think this will be a better level to challenge him at and see how some of this plays while he continues to work through those. Jet Williams, as I mentioned earlier, had a good week, maybe getting lonely after Cooper Pratt got called up, because in the 2 days following that, he hit 3 homers. The third one left the bat at 108.5, which was his hardest hit home run, and it was crushed. All 3 of them were 101 plus, so none of them were like cheap AAA homers. It'd be nice to see him get going again, because he had struggled. He had that really, really strong stretch for about 3 weeks from the end of April into the middle of May. Kind of fell off. A lot of the pop kind of disappeared. Now we're starting to see some of the extra base hits and the homers show back up. Hopefully this will be kind of a way to catapult himself into the majors at some point, because there is still going to be an opportunity potentially to take that third base job for now. And then Braylon Payne, he had a 2-homer week, another really strong week for him. I was just checking the T-Rats game a moment ago. He had an RBI double and a 2-run triple in the game today as well. So Braylon Payne continues to hit very, very well at the high A level. On the pitching side of things, in the DSL, there wasn't a ton of great stuff to talk about this week. So I've got 3 DSL pitchers and then a reliever at the high A level. But on the DSL side, I talked about Luis Aguayo last week as somebody coming off Tommy John surgery. He'd been going an inning at a time. He went 2 outings this week. One of them was an inning, and then he went 2 innings today. So far this year now, he is at 5 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, only 1 earned run. Like I mentioned last time, he's got a 4-seam and a 2-seam. He can run it up to 94 with both of them. He sits more in like that 90 to 92 range. It's a really, really good changeup. It's a solid-looking breaking ball. I kind of mentioned they don't do it with hitters a lot. It wouldn't shock me if he ended up coming stateside, because I know he's one of their bigger bonus guys for the pitching side of things last year. He had the Tommy John. They're kind of letting him work through it in the DSL, but I think once he stretches out, it wouldn't shock me if we saw him come to Arizona. I talked about Santiago Martinez last week. He followed up a really good start with another one. 4 innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, 1 earned run. Again, he's a lefty. He had a tough intro to pro baseball in 2025 with 3 really bad innings. But the video I've seen, it's a low 90s fastball with some run. It's a pretty good breaking ball. There's some changeup there. Super interesting lefty. And again, now he's had 2 starts and he's got 15 strikeouts in the DSL. So that's really encouraging. And he's also still only 17 at the moment. And then the last DSL arm to touch on is Yohan Gonzalez. He's gone 4 innings, or in his last outing, he went 4 innings, allowed 1 hit, walked 1, struck out 6, didn't allow any earned runs. The video I've seen of him, the fastball's in the upper 80s. He'll touch the low 90s, big breaking balls, spins the ball very well from what I heard when he was signing. Super projectable. Like, I think there's a lot more velo in there for Yohan Gonzalez. So seeing some good results so far. He posted all his strikeouts on his Instagram. I might post them on Twitter at some point here. I have to kind of edit the video to make it shorter because he didn't really cut it up at all. But I will probably post it because he's super interesting to me. I think there's a lot left on the bone in terms of like adding velo, adding strength, and it's already high spin stuff with good breakers. Like, I think he's super interesting. They gave him a decent bonus as well for a pitcher, which is always a good sign that they're pretty interested in the arm. And the final one I'll talk about is Quentin Lowe. The overall season numbers are not good. The stuff is still very good. He'll touch 99. He'll sit 97. His cutter, slider, whatever you want to call it, is thrown in like the 90 mile per hour range with sharp late movement. The command has been a problem. But the last 4 outings, he's gone 7 innings total. He struck out 11 in those 7 innings, only allowed 1 earned run. He still walked 5 and hit 1. So the free passes remain an issue, but if he can rein it in at all, I don't expect them to give up on him super soon. I know it's not good results. He's been in the system a while, but he missed 2 full seasons with injury. He was a two-way last time he was actually playing and healthy. This is the first time he's fully focused on pitching, and the stuff is too good to give up on anytime soon. So hopefully he can build off the last 7 innings. There's big time strikeout stuff there. There's high leverage relief stuff in there for him as he develops. The timeline's going to be it's going to be moving pretty quickly because he missed so much time and he's almost already getting to minor league free agency, all of that stuff. But I think this is a really interesting arm that they're going to have a chance to develop into an interesting relief option over the next year or two. So I hope they continue to give him opportunities. It's looking better, but he'll be one to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's all I've got. Pitching side of things hasn't been great of late. There's been like fine outings from guys who've gone, 6 innings, 3 earned or whatever, but nothing to really highlight, I guess.
It's going to do it for us on this week's edition of the Brewer Fanatic Podcast. I feel like the last 2 episodes, we've had a pretty dynamic range of topics.
We have.
I don't mind it either. I think it makes it more fun to walk through this stuff. So maybe that'll continue, but you'll have to listen in next week to find out. We'll be back with you as usual next Friday. Until then, thank you to everyone for listening along.